1. In 1973, we moved into our new house. I was 7 at the time. It was a brand new house in a brand new subdivision. As such, the majority of houses were purchased by young couples with young families. There were tons of kids around my age to play with, and since the majority of the adults were in the age range of 25 to 35, the grown-ups would all get together that first summer for neighborhood corn boils, barbecues, etc. Sometimes the women would get together and do things as a group. That Christmas, a bunch of the neighborhood women went on a trip to Bangor, Maine, to do some Christmas shopping. They were to spend the night in Maine and return the next day. With all the wives and girlfriends gone, that meant all the neighborhood men would be all alone that night as well. It turned out that the neighborhood men also had plans for that night and wanted to take full advantage of this rare night free from their wives and girlfriends. Shortly after my mother had left with the other women, my father began arranging steel chairs in the basement. I asked my father why he was doing that, and he told me that a few of the dads would be coming over that evening, and he pulled out a huge projection screen and hung it on the wall. I asked him if he would be watching movies and if I could watch too. He said no, because it would be after my bedtime, and also mentioned not to mention the projection screen or anything like that to my mother when she gets back home. Shortly after Dad had got me settled into bed, the neighborhood dads started arriving and going down into the basement. As this was happening, I started to drift off to sleep, but suddenly became awakened a little bit later by the voices of all the men in the basement with my father. They were whooping and hollering, cheering, stomping their feet, laughing very boisterously, having a really good time. As I lay there awake, my 7-year-old brain realized the men were really enjoying themselves with whatever it was they were doing down there, so I got out of bed and, as quietly as I could, I snuck stealthily like a trained ninja down the hallway. The boisterous festivities were becoming louder as I neared the end of the hallway. Then I crept across the kitchen, and was now standing at the precipice of the basement stairs. From this vantage point I could hear all the men loud and clear, but could not see what was happening. As desperate as I was to find out what was happening in the basement, I didn't want to take the chance of my father seeing me, especially when he had told me earlier that I was not under any circumstances to go down into the basement while all the dads were there. So I paused for a moment at the top of the stairs, but childhood curiosity got the best of me, and I stepped down the first step and paused, then slowly the next step, pause, then 2 or 3 more, then holy crap, naked woman on the projection screen with massive breasts. And there my father was, standing up in the middle of all the men with a giant bottle of liquor in his hand, behaving the rowdiest of the bunch, when suddenly his head turned, mid-Yahoo screech, and his eyes locked with mine. He lost it. He quickly came over and ushered me back upstairs to my bedroom, cursing that I wasn't supposed to come downstairs, and at the same time profusely pleading with me not to tell my mother or any of the other neighborhood mothers what I saw. Luckily for my dad, at 7 years of age, I was too young to know what blackmail was. 2. I ate my wife's special brownies, but it's not what you're thinking. They're not that kind of special. To give a little backstory, my wife and I have been trying to eat healthier lately, tracking our calories and protein, and vitamins, minerals, all of that. Over the last few weeks, we've realized that on a good day, we get maybe 15 to 20 grams of fiber, despite eating vegetables and fruit with at least 2 of our meals. So we've been dedicating extra attention to upping our fiber intake. And now we're getting at least 20, maybe sometimes up to 40 grams a day. So today, I come home and my wife is sitting on the couch. I go into the kitchen, and there is almost a whole 9x13 pan of brownies sitting on the counter. I ask if she's saving them. She says no. I ask if I can have one. She says, "Of course, baby, eat as much as you want. They're healthy." That was all I needed to hear. I grab one and start eating it. It's a little dry, texture is a little off, but it's not bad. I start on dinner, eat another one. At this point, I think it's important to say that the hardest part of keeping my calorie intake down is I snack if given the opportunity. Not bad when it's carrots and cherry tomatoes, but if they're sweets, they have to be out of sight or I'll find myself just grabbing and eating without thinking about it. A bad habit from when I quit smoking and snacked to keep my mouth busy, I guess. As I finish cooking, I realize I've eaten 5 of these brownies, so I do the logical thing and grab a 6th, eating it as I walk to the living room to tell my dear wife, who said to eat as many as I want, that I might have to make her some brownies and I'll need the recipe for her healthy brownies. She gets a confused look on her face, followed quickly by concern, and replaced with almost immediate amusement. "Honey," she says, "how many brownies did you eat?" 6, I say, after swallowing the last bite, slightly apprehensive at her poorly concealed amusement. "Why, is something wrong?" "Well, that depends on your time frame for wrong. Honestly, right now, no. Nothing is wrong in 30 minutes to an hour? Maybe." At this point, I'm beginning to get concerned, and she thankfully didn't keep me waiting long on the reason for her amusement. I didn't make those brownies, my coworker did. I told her about us needing more fiber, and she said she had the perfect recipe. Each one of those brownies is supposed to have about 7 grams of fiber in them, and you ate 6 of them. At this point, I knew I made a horrible, horrible mistake. But I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I've been getting enough fiber that it won't be like the time I jumped from almost no fiber to eating a Fiber 1 bar with an Olipop with my lunch and painted my backside with blue porta-potty water 45 minutes later. Maybe it won't be so bad. Besides, how could one brownie have 7 grams of fiber? They weren't amazing, but they were better than the fiber brownies you get at the store. Alas, my hope was for naught. No sooner had I finished dinner, and my stomach rumbled in a way that spoke of the horrors to come. Immediately I made haste to the porcelain throne, yelling to my wife that she would need to serve dinner tonight. No sooner had I taken my seat than the floodgates were blown wide open. I'll spare you the details, but suffice to say that I was seated on my throne for over an hour and needed a shower after. My rear is tired, the bathroom still smells of my regret, and my wife can't look at me without chuckling and has made it known she will be telling the evil person who made the brownies about how well they worked on her poor unsuspecting husband. I will be asking how healthy these random snacks are from now on. 3. I'm in my 40s now, so I have a bevy of embarrassing tales. But if I really think about it, it's really hard to top the one I'm about to tell. In my younger years, I wasn't particularly active. I struggled with weight issues due to this fact, and my mom came to the decision one day that something needed to be done about this issue. I was 13 or 14 at the time, and my mother had a tough conversation with me about inherent heart and weight problems in the family, and how she didn't want to see me go down that path. So throughout the majority of the spring, we tried out a few things my community had to offer, from biking and hiking to martial arts. None of this was particularly to my liking, and so this left me with 2 options: a youth golf league in my area and a youth tennis league. The day I tried out for the golf league, I realized I didn't quite fit in. These were a bunch of uppity rich kids that looked down their noses at anybody who wasn't wearing whatever name brand crap was on the market that day. I was a Kmart kid, and for the maybe 90 minutes I lasted out there, they made every effort to remind me of that fact. Needless to say, if I was surrounded by these types for an extended period of time, I more than likely would have snapped within the first 48 hours, so that was out. Begrudgingly, I went and tried out for the tennis league the next day, and I fully expected the same treatment and the same attitudes. I was pleasantly surprised when the husband and wife duo in charge were 2 of the nicest people you could ever hope to encounter. Both of them played tennis at high school and college, met each other through the sport, and now their kids were a part of the league for pretty much the same reasons my mom wanted me to give it a shot. Within the first 2 hours of being there, I saw them teaching all the right values, good sportsmanship, friendly competition, and the fact that we were out here to do it for the love of the game, and the fun of the sport versus point systems and unnecessary pressure. The clincher for me was when the wife, a woman I would get to know as Ms. Amanda, saw me watching while sitting on the grass just on the other side of the fence by the tennis courts. When she asked me if I wanted to join in, I told her I didn't have any equipment. "Oh, sweetheart, don't let that stop you. Give me a moment," she said as she got the attention of a boy about my age, resting on an interior bench as he took a break from his previous turn. She's talking to him, and he's nodding while looking over in my direction. After a minute or so, the kid stands up and waves me over. He introduces himself as Billy. He is the son of the family. We sit and chat for a minute, and he tells me that he'll let me use his equipment as long as I'm careful, and if I decide that I want to join the group, he has a spare racket he would allow me to borrow, so long as I returned it to him as soon as I got one of my own. I was blown away. This kid hadn't known me 20 seconds, and he was ready to allow me to borrow something that I knew wasn't cheap. I ended up spending a little over an hour on the court that day, while Billy, his mom, and dad observed me play and gave me tips. Not once did I feel judged or out of place. By the end of the session, I knew I'd found an activity I would enjoy, not just because of the fact that tennis, at least to me, is an inherently fun game. The people surrounding me kept me in good spirits. So every weekend throughout the spring, and well into early summer, I was out there getting better and better. And though I was no Bjorn Borg, I was fairly good at it. It honestly became a passion of mine, but then August rolls around and we get slammed with a heat wave. It was 102 degrees on the coolest day, and for the 90s, that was damn near unheard of. Amanda and Richie felt it was a good idea that we didn't play during such dangerous weather. That being said, they didn't want us languishing at home either, and so, with about 24 hours' notice, they took turns getting in contact with the parents of the other kids in the group, myself included, and got permission to take whatever kid wanted to go down to the Jersey Shore and to the Wildwood Boardwalk, where we'd find a couple of fairly nice water parks. Amanda and Richie would take care of our entrance fee, so long as our parents gave us enough money for lunch. Fair deal. My mom was 100% on board, and I can remember being so excited when I went to bed that night. So excited, in fact, that I didn't fall asleep until well after midnight, and Richie's brother Pat was supposed to pick us all up in the group van around 10 a.m. that following morning. Well, I ended up sleeping in. I woke up to the sound of a horn blaring in my driveway. Half awake, it took a second for me to realize it was Pat. Say what you will about the man, he was awfully nice, but patience was not one of his virtues. He had a 3-honk rule that consisted of him driving away 30 seconds after the third honk if you didn't come out to the vehicle. I darted out of bed and frantically started searching for my swim trunks before realizing they were still in the washer from the night before. I didn't have much time to spare, so I grabbed the first pair of shorts I saw, which happened to be a pair of polyester jogging shorts. I threw them on because they were dark in color with a strange camo pattern on them, so I knew they wouldn't necessarily be see-through once I hit the water. I was so quick throwing them on that I didn't put on a pair of underwear. I grabbed a t-shirt from my dresser, threw it on, grabbed the $20 bill that's sitting on the counter thanks to my mom, and I run out the door as Pat begins backing out of my driveway. I run up to the van and hop in the back seat. "Skin of your teeth, big guy, skin of your teeth," Pat says while chuckling to himself. I hand him the $20 bill for safekeeping, and the next thing I know, we're taking a 2-hour drive to the Jersey Shore. Upon arriving at the Wildwood Boardwalk, I'm blown away. It was much bigger than I anticipated. Games, arcades, shops, and places to stop off for a bite to eat, stretched as far as the eye could see. A large wooden roller coaster peeked over the horizon as if it were welcoming us. A Ferris wheel that had to have been about 8 stories tall set off in the distance not too far away. I was in love with the place. This is to say, we hadn't even made it to the water park just yet. So after walking a little ways, we ended up at this place called Morey's Pier. This place was positively loaded with rides, and I was so excited at the visuals that I almost forgot we were supposed to be going to the water park. We get a little further in, and Amanda is sitting there waving for us as she munches on a cup of Curly's fries. She informs us that she has never been a really strong swimmer, so she isn't going to do much at the water park other than observe us, but she was going to do her best to have just as much fun as the rest of us. She joins our group, and we meet up with Richie by a ticket booth. And as we line up, he not only gets us passes for the water park, he gets us passes for the rides as well. I knew I was in for a day of fun I would remember for the rest of my life. I just wish I remembered it for the right reasons. So as we're walking around the park, we noticed this massive line for a water slide called Shotgun Falls. It was set up kind of like this. The slide was at a perfect 45-degree angle, and the riders would go down being accompanied by a fast-moving stream of water. When you hit the end of the slide, it was about a 20-foot drop straight down into a really deep pool. As scary as that may sound for some of you, I was paying attention to the people who were partaking in the activity, and I don't recall seeing one person who didn't look like they enjoyed it. So after lounging about in the lazy river with my friends for a while, I decided Shotgun Falls was something I was going to give a try before we left. Eventually I find myself standing in line, and before I knew it I'm enjoying this short-lived adrenaline rush. I get out of the pool, and as I'm walking I can hear people laughing. Now, as you can imagine, there are a bunch of locals and tourists out here all having a good time, and so I dismissed the laughter at first. I realized I had to meet up with my group as we all separated at some point, but I was walking around for a good 20 to 30 minutes until I eventually ran into Billy and Richie. We greeted each other as we normally would, but all of a sudden Richie's face goes pale and Billy looks at me, his eyes downwards, and he says, dude?" while pointing at my crotch. I look down and I am instantly mortified. You see, as I was going down Shotgun Falls, I felt something snag. It wasn't anything that worried me at the time because I figured it was just the pressurized water, but suddenly the truth was punching me in the face like its name was Evander Holyfield. The snag I felt was my shorts getting caught on something on the way down, and when that happened, a good chunk of the fabric around my crotch stayed wherever it got snagged, while I continued to move forward. I walked around looking for my group for that entire time, and not a single person stopped me, but plenty of them laughed. I honestly hadn't put two and two together due to the fact that I was more concerned about finding my party. Sure, it was breezy, I felt a draft, but I was also soaking wet from being in and out of cold water for the majority of the day. But there I was, tackle box wide open, my gear hanging out in the open for all to see. I thought I could die on the spot. At the time, I'm pretty certain I was more than likely wishing for that to happen. I proceeded to squat and pull my wet t-shirt down over my knees. I then walked like a duck for about 100 feet, before Richie piped in with, "Yeah, this isn't going to work. Do you have a change of clothes?" I let him know that I inadvertently slept in that morning and I almost missed the van. The only bit of anything I had was what I was wearing at the time. I then remembered the $20 I handed to Pat. Richie told Billy to stay with me while we looked for his uncle. Billy, being the kid he was, and still is to this day, pulled his towel off his shoulder and told me to wrap it around my waist. I did that so fast you would have thought he was a drill sergeant giving me an order. So we sat and waited at the entrance to Morley's, and roughly 20 minutes later, Richie and Pat show up. Pat is red in the face as if he's trying to fight back the laughter when his brother playfully smacks him in the back of the head and tells him I'd been through enough already. Richie comes over, pats me on the back before holding open his towel. Pat walks over and hands me a pair of red lifeguard sweatshorts he grabbed from a gift shop on the way back. He too opens up his towel. Billy stands behind me and asks for his towel back, and the three men form a kind of fabric triangle of privacy, while I take off the shorts and put on the pair Pat so graciously grabbed for me. I thank those three guys for coming through for me profusely. The gravity of the embarrassment hit me after I put those replacement shorts on. I almost broke out in tears of gratitude and realization. Like I said, I walked around for an extended period of time, and not a single person thought to point out the fact that I was exposed. Not a lifeguard, not a person also out enjoying themselves, surprisingly not a single one of the many police officers patrolling the boardwalk on bikes. As I walked past a few of them, Billy, Richie, and Pat gave me a few minutes to collect myself, and we decided to go find Amanda and the rest of the group. It didn't take us long, but when we found her, the rest of the group was looking rather dejected. As it turns out, Shotgun Falls had to be closed long enough for the people in charge to get an obstruction out of the slide. This meant turning off the water and getting maintenance out there with the proper tools to remove said obstruction. When they removed what looked like a pair of somebody's shorts, that chunk of mine, they realized somehow a bolt on the slide had gone through it and was sticking up just enough to be a problem for anybody who might have encountered it with bare flesh, let alone a swimsuit. They ended up closing the ride for the rest of the day in order to get the repair taken care of. I tried to play it cool, but in my head that was insult to injury. Pat looked at me, eyebrows raised, wide-eyed, with a half grin, and it was almost as if he could read my mind. He put a finger to his lips as if to say, "Don't worry, I won't say anything." And so the rest of the day went off without a hitch. Rode a few roller coasters, got to enjoy myself in Dante's Inferno. Had some fun on go-karts, and I ate what I feel to this day is one of the top 3 best slices of pizza I've ever had in my life. Thank you for that, Max. As much as I try to put the whole short-ripping incident in the past, I've got 2 kids of my own. We've visited Wildwood a few times in their lives, and you better believe I make sure they're wearing a pair of tighty-whities under those swim trunks just in case. Thank you for listening to my story. 4. I decided that now my out-of-stock pills had at last arrived, I get everything put into my really very useful pill container. It sorts them by day, by AM and PM, and keeps them in little separate compartments so that I can just grab the days I need and take them with me if I'm not going to be home. It's a much better system than having to rummage in my big pill storage box every day, trying to make sure I get the quantities right and trying to remember if I did take my morning pills already or not. I sat in bed that evening and went through everything in the rummage box. I popped each pill into the little bowl, one type at a time, in the exact quantity I needed, and then put them all into the right containers. The next morning I took it downstairs and put it back on the side table by the sofa, which is a place where the cats are much less likely to push it onto the floor, I've found. I was so pleased with myself that I went and made myself an almost proper breakfast and brunch, and then did some reading for a nice change. I was definitely starting to feel more like myself after a few hard months, along with my ongoing health conditions. But I still managed to do a bit of cleaning in the kitchen that afternoon and treated myself to a nice ready meal curry for tea. I even managed to go to bed early and got on with some more reading. It was only as I was settling down that I realized I'd not taken my pills. Not only that, I'd not taken my morning pills either. I can easily manage to go up and downstairs twice without a bit of time in between, so I decided to read a bit more, then I'd go and get them. Big mistake. Of course, I fell asleep, and didn't wake up until late the next morning. My cats actually woke me up, which they never do. They'd rather stay in bed where it's warm. But I was so grateful for them because I was having the worst nightmare I can ever remember, and the last thing I recall from it was desperately trying to scream, but not being able to. I was in a complete state of panic when I woke up, and overwhelmed with anxiety like I haven't felt in years. It was horrible. Everything around me looked wrong, and I felt almost completely disconnected from reality. I was shaky and dizzy, and it felt like the walls were moving, and gravity wasn't working right. I managed to very carefully get downstairs, take my morning dose for that day, and then took the evening pills upstairs with me, with a bag of salty and sweet popcorn, some Maltesers, and a big drink. Then I went back to bed, and eventually felt okay enough to sleep again, happily, with no more dreams. I know that I do dream, I must, everyone does, but it's extremely rare that I remember doing so, or anything more than vague impressions and snatches of feelings. No visual mind and no visual memory doesn't help with recall. But I know that if I miss one type of my pills, I will suddenly start having really vivid and complex dreams. That plus missing my anxiety meds and anti-migraine pills made for a bit of a perfect storm. So remember, kids, trying to be organized only causes trouble. 5. Okay, so this all just happened the other night. I met this girl on a dating app and surprisingly, found out very quickly we were extremely compatible. Conversation came super easy, and we quickly exchanged numbers and called each other up to chat every night for the whole week I was out of state on vacation. We had an insane amount of similarities, including an obsession with true crime podcasts, serial killers, etc. One difference we did have was horror flicks. She told me she gets scared easily. I, on the other hand, absolutely love horror flicks. This is an important detail, or so I believe it is. Anyway, fast forward a few days and I am back in my home state, and we decided to meet up for dinner and walk around the lake by my place. We meet up and have dinner, and the conversation somehow lands back on serial killers and horror films. We go into detail about some of our most memorable cases we've followed. Dinner finishes up, and I pay the bill and ask if she's still up for a walk. She says yes. Mind you, it's gotten dark by this point. We both drove our own cars, so I told her to follow me as I jumped into my car. I punched in the name of the lake in my GP, and away we went. The drive was only about 10 minutes, but I didn't really seem to remember ever going this way. The roads got darker, streetlights became sparse, and I had to take multiple turns. I was really starting to doubt this route, and as I looked in the rear view, I saw she was following from further behind. At this point, I figured it was best for me to call her and tell her I think Google Maps was jerking me around. So I pulled over on the side of the road, I looked more closely at maps, and decided to call her. As she was stopped about a half-block behind me. As the phone rang, I saw her flip the car around and speed off in the opposite direction. She never answered, and after letting the whole thing sink in, I drove home, opened my dating app to see she also blocked me. Then it dawned on me that I'm an absolute idiot, and that talking about my favorite serial killers with a woman who was easily spooked, then leading her to the middle of nowhere, was probably just about the worst first date idea ever. I'm bummed, and I feel awful for scaring the crap out of her, but I guess I just have to laugh it off at this point. I don't think I'll be hearing from her again. Next time I'll just go to a damn coffee shop, like a not serial killer. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Embarrassing Stories episode 106, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and also follow me on my Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel. Links for that are in the description. Okay, I don't think we have any other business, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day, and today's question is, we're pausing on the answers for a little bit, but we're still doing questions for now. I'll try and get back to the answers next week. Let's see. What is a location that is not very obvious, but you think would be a good location for a serial killer to ply their trade? See, the author of the last story mentioned taking future dates to a cafe. However, I think that'd be a bad idea because people tend to let their guard down in cafes. You're relaxing, you're having a nice drink, coffee, tea, hot chocolate, whatever else. Maybe you're munching on a biscuit or a cookie. You're chatting to friends, you're feeling good, you're talking about your day, talking about your life. So you might not realize that those around you could be listening in. Listening to what your schedule is, your comings, your goings, when you're alone, when you're not. In fact, I'm suddenly very, very glad I don't ever go to cafes. Oh dear. Well, let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.